to introduce our keynote speaker for this evening, Chris Giancarlo. And there's so much I can say about Chris. He's the executive chairman, co-founder for Digital Dollar Project, a very dear mentor and friend. But I want to give you just a little bit of his biography to consider before he starts his remarks. So the Honorable J. Christopher Giancarlo served as the 13th chairman of the U.S. Commodity Futures Trading Commission. Considered one of the most influential individuals in financial regulation, he also was a member of the U.S. Financial Stability Oversight Committee, the President's Working Group on Financial Markets, and the Executive Board of the International Organization of Securities Commissions. Giancarlo was author of Crypto Dad, The Fight for the Future of Money, an account of his oversight of the world's first regulated market for Bitcoin derivatives and the coming digital network transformation of financial services. Giancarlo is co-founder and executive chairman, as I mentioned, of the Digital Dollar Project, senior counsel to the international law firm Wilkie Farr & Gallagher, and also board director, advisor, and angel investor in numerous public and private technology and financial services companies. Among other recent recognitions, Giancarlo was appointed to the rank of, Chris, you know this gets me every time, Chevalier? Oh, better. Okay, I'm getting better. In the National Order of Merit by French President Macron in recognition of his expertise in crypto finance. So please, without further ado, Chris, welcome to the stage.
Well, thank you, Jen. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone. There's going to be a time when we finish up tomorrow for so many thanks to so many people that made this happen. I'm not going to do that now. I just have one thanks, and that thanks is to all of you for bringing your thoughtfulness, your intelligence, your goodwill to bear today. We successfully were able to take the discussion of CBDC, stablecoins, and crypto out of the politicization of Washington and have an intelligent and thoughtful discussion of it, which is a miraculous achievement. So thank you to all of you. I have a few minutes tonight before a fabulous panel that you're going to hear from in a few minutes, and I want to use the next 10 minutes to issue, if you'll allow me, a challenge, indeed a call of action to all of us gathered together following today's discussions. And that challenge is simply to make the future of digital currency one that is worthy of free societies and free peoples and true to our finest and most noble ideals. So what do I mean by that? What am I talking about? Well, let me start by observing that modern money today is changing and changing rapidly. That was the message we all heard. It's expanding from fungible cash bills and electronic notations on the balance sheets of central and commercial banks to unique digital notations on new digital infrastructure operated by global decentralized collectives, national sovereign governments, and private sector entities. In short, the internet is doing to banking and finance and money what it's already done to information gathering, Wikipedia, retail shopping, Amazon, entertainment, YouTube, social networking, Facebook and Twitter, photography, TikTok, journalism, and so much more. And what is that? Well, it's increasing speed, efficiency, and automation. It's lowering costs. It's increasing inclusion. It's unlocking new business models. And whoa, is it disrupting intermediaries and challenging the traditional financial system. And it's already happening. As we know from the great work of the Atlantic Council, today well over 100 foreign nations representing over 95% of the world's GDP are exploring various forms of central bank digital currency. And it's not just central banks, it's stablecoins as well. Global stablecoin usage continues to increase dramatically. Stablecoins settled over 11 trillion on-chain transactions in 2022, and that number almost surpasses the payment volume of Visa, and reached 14% of the volume settled by ACH and 1% settled by Fedwire. The supply of stablecoins has grown from less than 3 billion just 3 years ago to 125 billion today. Here's the point. Whether or not one country deploys central bank digital currency, or many do, the fact of the matter is all of us and our fellow men and women are going to be dealing with crypto, CBDC, and stable coins for years to come. The sometimes fashionable debate in Washington and elsewhere between CBDCs and stablecoins is a false choice. The future is all of the above. The backdrop to the deployment of CBDCs and the development of stablecoins, as well as the continued vitality of Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other cryptos, the backdrop is an increasingly multipolar, complex, and fragmented world riven by war, global conflict, and political and social division. There's a trend line that the later 20th century financial system, dominated by multinational banks, many of them American, the US dollar, and Pax Americana, is gradually yielding to a 21st century worldwide kaleidoscope of overlapping and sometimes interoperable and many times non-interoperable digital networks of value, some decentralized, like Bitcoin, while others are variously centralized and operated by global banks and big tech firms, and others deployed and even exported for sale by national governments. And there's a danger in that global kaleidoscope. Those centralized digital currencies that emerge, both sovereign and non-sovereign, will be gathering points for massive amounts of data about the economic and financial activities of users, our fellow citizens, and indeed voters. Many thoughtful people across the political spectrum, from right to left and across the globe, are appropriately concerned about the misuse of such honeypots of private financial information. They're concerned about direct access by both government and big tech to such troves of personal data. And they anticipate political pressure on private sector actors to conduct surveillance, report on activity, and disable financial transactions with disfavored groups and activities, sadly, in a similar fashion to the now increasingly evident censorship of speech on social media by both governments and big tech firms. And that's why, regardless of the form of digital currency, CBDCs or stablecoins, sovereign or non-sovereign, it's imperative that free society thoughtfully consider privacy implications and insist that the future of money be consistent with key free society laws, norms, and values. That's why we launched the Digital Dollar Project in January of 2020, to be a neutral, nonprofit forum considering how best to modernize the US dollar, preserve its reserve currency status, and the values it represents in this coming world of decentralized and centralized digital currency. In some ways, to provide a safe space where thoughtful considerations like this can take place from the politicization of our times. The Digital Dollar Project does not call for ready deployment of a US CBDC, although some people believe that's what we do, but we don't. We believe that the US should only consider issuing a CBDC once key design elements of privacy, inclusion, security, distribution, and economic stability are properly understood and, most importantly, democratically addressed. But we do encourage the US to assert principled leadership and assert it now in CBDC experimentation, both here at home and in digital currency standard setting abroad that is consistent with our norms and values. And we further believe that dollar-based stablecoins can play an important role in ensuring the role of the US dollar. Designed right, a digital dollar, or indeed a digital euro, or a digital pound, or any other digital currency system, sovereign or non-sovereign, can run on systems that are operationally and objectively transparent, providing the public with independent assurance about technical function, security, and resistance to impermissible monitoring, data mining, and other exploitation. In fact, individual economic privacy and censorship resistance should be affirmative design features and competitive advantages of digital currencies that are worthy of free societies. But such a design approach will only work if governments are willing to embrace new digital technologies and regulatory approaches for satisfying legitimate national security and law enforcement objectives. These technologies include privacy enhancing, or what they call PET technologies, such as zero-knowledge proofs, homomorphic encryption, and multi-party computation that enable parties to prove that an encrypted proposition is true without revealing underlying private information. Combining these PET technologies with big data analysis, pattern recognition, and AI, as we heard today, will allow law enforcement to protect privacy, and here's the important point, by identifying wrongdoing when it actually takes place, rather than invading people's privacy without cause in case it someday might. By encoding individual economic privacy into its very architecture, CBDCs and stablecoins should serve as desired instruments for people the world over who aspire to financial autonomy and inclusion consistent with basic human rights and civic liberties. I want to quote a friend and former regulatory counterpart who I'm sure many in this audience know, and that's former Governor of the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, Mark Carney. In remarks to the BIS in 2021, Carney reminded fellow central bankers that, quote, the value of money requires not just the belief of the public at a point in time, but critically the consent of the public at all times. He said, when it comes to money, the consent and trust of the public must be nurtured and continuously maintained. Well, when it comes to digital money, obtaining such consent and trust of free people will depend on not just the value of the digital currency, but upon the values inherent in the underlying digital architecture and design. And the most important of those values may be financial privacy, civil liberties, and the rule of law. Clearly, ordinary citizens have as much to gain from the digital networking of the world's financial systems as do central banks and governments. But the same people have as much to lose if digital currency diminishes their autonomy or their inherent worth as free people. Governments that deploy CBDCs or support stablecoins that do not protect financial privacy or otherwise depart from the core values of a people will find such digital currencies rejected by their citizens to the benefit of digital currencies that do. Yet those digital currencies that protect financial privacy and lawful transactions while driving network innovation will garner the enduring confidence of free people and those around the world who aspire to free life. The nations that foster such privacy-protecting digital currencies will win both the economic power prize in this digital future, but also the trust and consent and affection, dare I say it, of their people. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's clear that the future is not a choice between CBDCs and stablecoins and crypto. It's all of the above. Nor is the future whether the digitally networked future of money can be forestalled. It can't. It's coming. The digital future of money is upon us. The real choice is between financial freedom and financial control, and the role of free people in driving key design choices and related regulatory networks. 30 years ago, in the first wave of the internet, the US and other leading free nations made sure that the Internet of Information reflected the values of open and free people rather than closed and repressive ones. Today, the free world must again work together to make sure that this coming Internet of value reflects similar values of financial freedom and economic liberty. So, in closing, here's my plea to you this evening. Let's work together as our enlightened predecessors did 30 years ago to ensure that the future of digital networks of value and the digital networks of money is one that is safe for the free world. Let's set standards for digital currencies, sovereign and non-sovereign, CBDCs and stablecoins that are worthy of free societies and free people everywhere. Let's not be intimidated by this innovation, but just as our predecessors did 30 years ago, let's seize it to enhance the worth of our fellow men and women. Let's shape it in accordance with our finest and noblest human values, and let's get on it today, tomorrow, and every year to come. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, Chris, for those really important remarks. Good evening, everyone. I'm Angie Lau, Editor-in-Chief, Co-founder, and CEO of Forkast. It is a pleasure to be with you tonight. I have the honor and the privilege to be chairing the next panel that follows on Christian Carlo's very, very poignant words, which is, the future is inevitable. And all of you participating in these conversations today recognize the roles that you play in helping us shape our future. So thank you very much. Without further ado, I would love our audience to help greet and welcome our panelists tonight. Let's start with CEO and co-founder of Digital Asset, Yuval Rooz. Former Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, partner at Solomare Capital, and Vice Chairman of Teneo, Paul Ryan. Head of BIS Innovation Hub, Bank of International Settlements. Please welcome Cecilia Skingsley. And we've got one more chair to fill, last but not least, Global Head of Strategy, Office of the CTO at Citi, Andres Wolberg-Stok. All right, so our tummies are full, and so are our brains. I think we've all been really inundated with a lot of really smart conversations that really was the full spectrum of wholesale, retail, CBDCs, stablecoins, digital assets, private sector, public sector roles. Many of industry sectors and government agencies and central banks are represented tonight. And I thank you all for being here, because as an average global citizen, watching this story unfold from afar, from my perch, and recognizing the importance of this technology, I'm also seeing the myriad differences that arise from different jurisdictions. And it is really a telling moment in time. And Paul, I'm going to start with you as someone who is obviously a veteran in the political arena, and now lending your expertise to the private sector and certainly to CEOs and governments alike. How did we get here? As we talk about the digitalization of money, how did it get so politicized? How does technology get so politicized?
It's easy politics. Well, first of all, we're going into an election year. There's that, but it's easy politics. And the politics come from a good place, I would say, the populism. It comes from a pro-privacy, pro-freedom place, so that's good. But it's such a misunderstood technology. Very few people know what it is, how it works, what it does. A lot of people think it's a choice as to whether this is going to happen or not. It's not. And the politics is very simple for ambitious populists. So the question is, can you see through this particular moment, the Overton window as we describe it? I think the answer is yes, because the inevitability of this technology is here. As an American, I want to see our reserve currency status continue, and that means we have to stay on top of this and ahead of this and help the world as a conservative of the classical liberal variant, meaning a limited government, free market, individual rights, advocate. I want to make sure that the free world, free societies, have their values protected inside the architecture of this as it is deployed across the world. So you're going to have authoritarian regimes deploy their versions of this, and the question is, can the free world stay ahead of this and protect our critical values, privacy, freedom, liberty, security, and that's where this populism comes from. So I'm a little shocked at how it got out of control, but honestly, it's really not as big as you think. If you walk around the state of Wisconsin and poll people in the street, they don't know what the hell you're talking about. Mm-hmm. So, it's just sort of catnip for people who are running for a couple of offices, for president and the rest. I'm not that stressed about it, because when you drill down on the issue, if you go to the Financial Services Committee and talk to Patrick McHenry or people like that, they know exactly what this is, they understand the politics, and they know we have, first of all, they're moving a stablecoin bill right now. They know we have to get on top of this. I think the Fed is worried about their independence, so they're going to keep their heads low for a little while they figure this out. I'd like to see America take a bigger leadership role in this, but I think our politics is probably holding us back as a government for the most part at this time.
Because in other parts of the world, the average person, and not necessarily in Wisconsin, might be in Seoul, it might be in Hong Kong, do absolutely know what you're talking about. And they're experiencing it, they're conducting it, and that really comes from the private sector, Yuval. How have you seen the private sector roll out this technology globally, and what is the interface and the experience that maybe retail consumers or the average person is experiencing that is also driving potentially policy abroad?
Yeah, so first of all, I think we've been in the space for now 9 years, and where you've seen a lot of advancements in the usage of the technology is in non-money related assets. So bonds, private equity funds, structured products. And over there, you're already seeing the value of the technology. So I truly believe it's inevitable that it will get to money, because the holy grail is to actually put money and other assets on the same rails. Mm-hmm. That's really where you unlock the real potential of this technology. So I think that one of the biggest issues that this industry had, specifically related to this technology, is that 5 years ago, there were so many promises on how this is going to change the world, but there was nothing to show for. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people really put this technology into the bucket of, a bunch of crypto bros that are just pumping coins. I think now you're actually able to show demonstrable use cases, not even use cases. I think when you say use cases, it sounds still like an experiment, but actual asset classes that are processing hundreds of billions of dollars of transactions on a daily basis. You're seeing reconciliation being reduced. You're seeing operational risk being reduced, settlement risk being reduced. So I think that having these other asset classes that are already using the technology in real life is helping, at least for digital asset, when we're having conversations with the Fed, with the OCC, and with regulators globally to say, look, this is not a pipe dream, this is actual reality. And guess what? All of these organizations that are using this technology for other asset classes Guess what? They're worried about privacy. They're worried about scalability. All of the things that you're worried about when it comes to money. So I actually think that, very similar to Paul, you are seeing a lot of politics play in some of the challenges. But I will tell you that at least behind closed doors, we are finding much more open ears. And now the fact that you have use cases that are showing real results is really helping propelling this forward.
Andres, how do you think about it, and how does traditional finance, as you've evolved in the space, obviously as the incumbent financier, right, as a sector of which you're a participant, embracing the very technology that Yuval, one of the OGs in this space from the private sector, has really kind of built up. And so now how are you adopting this from a more traditional finance perspective, full knowing that you are engaging with different jurisdictions, different governments, and different agencies?
Yes, and traditional finance is less and less traditional by the day. But I think I would build on Yuval's point about the digitization of many other types of assets and the fact that maybe demonstrating those capabilities of the technology and the efficiencies that are there for the taking might be an easier road there than focusing on the lightning rod of the very thing that symbolizes the money in people's lives. So maybe there are less sensitive points to begin with. Maybe the underlying, the infrastructure of global commerce and trade and payments, maybe tokenizing commercial bank money, tokenizing central bank money on a wholesale basis, things that are maybe on the whole less sensitive, less of a flashpoint for the political debate, especially in this context, but in ways that can set the scene where there is the return on investment seen as being there for consumers to eventually do a retail CBDC. But if you think about scale in terms of the number of transactions and the throughput that is necessary, it's probably also easier to start with something that is wholesale rather than retail.
That's already happening, right, Cecilia? You run 7 innovation teams around the world. I've seen pilot projects happening between countries. It's already happening.
Yes, thank you very much for being here. I think I might be the only non-American on the stage, and I'm also representing an international organization. So, okay, I'm already on deep water, and I'm going to try to avoid saying anything that's going to be interpreted as a comment to U.S. politics. So, watch me square this circle. But yes, the BIS is there to the best of our ability, help central banks in their pursuit to deliver monetary and financial stability. So it's a membership-driven organization. The Federal Reserve is a member, as you know. And there's so much going on in the tech space, as we all know. And then you have to think about, okay, cool stuff. We can build a better world, and certainly in the financial service area. How do we make sure it works for people? How do we make sure it works in the domestic area? Societies want to make their different choices, that's fine. But if we want to continue to play together, even actually make it better when we transact together, we get to bring our heads together and see how we get that done. And yes, we are, there is a number of experiments, projects being done, both from the BIS side, which is done in a very transparent way, which I really love with the projects, because anyone can sort of look in and follow and get upset or get excited or not care. All reactions are fine. But technology only takes you part of the way. What really is necessary is to agree on sort of governance and who's paying for what and how do you run the thing and from where do you run it. And that takes sheer willpower. And ladies and gentlemen, there is a lot of willpower out there to get things done. A lot of countries are saying that, yeah, they want to participate in this conversation and experiments, and they don't make any commitments that they're going to launch a CBDC, so they can manage to bring those two messages across at the same time. So I'm just saying that others can walk and talk at the same time, and that's something
And also
worth
chew gum.
considering.
It is worth considering because there is a responsibility, some would say, from leadership that is either missing or in some cases, and I share Cecilia's diplomatic dance, compared to other jurisdictions in the world that are seizing it, and very strongly. When we started Forkast in 2018, one of the key stories from my perspective was to share what China very publicly was doing in the CBDC arena. At the time in 2018, they were already years ahead. We also know that in terms of emerging markets and in different parts of the world, money and influence and politics really do combine. And so, you know, when you take a look, and this is a question for the group, when you take a look from the both public policy space and the private sector space, what is the convergence that needs to happen in an intellectually honest way so that we could pave the way for really a formidable future dollar?
I'll give you the political answer, then I'll let Yuval give you the technical answer. Our politics are early in the rudimentary phase. They're in the early phase of this, and all the populist politics against it is they're just assuming it's a retail CBDC, right? The Fed is going to give you your money, and then they're going to surveil you, and they're going to tell you what you can and cannot buy. It's just that simple. China's doing it. We're going to do it also. It's awful. So that's where the politics is today. Now, what's coming after this? First of all, truth, that's not what a two-tier system is, and that's not what CBD, so there's facts to come behind that to put those myths to the lie, because no one that I know in Congress is proposing, and by the way, this does have to go through Congress, no one is proposing that we have a retail CBDC from the Fed. The Fed would never do that, in my opinion. So there's that. Here's what's happening. I just looked at my phone. I called a friend in the bond market today. How much is the Treasury going to float today this week in the bond markets? $626 billion. Bills, bonds, and notes, $626 billion. So, you know, we got to sell this stuff. It's helpful that we're a reserve currency. If we continue to act like we're not a reserve currency, it's going to be much harder to sell this stuff at a reasonable rate. So we've got the fiscal pressures coming down on us, which means we better innovate along with the world, or else we're going to lose our reserve currency even faster than our profligate fiscal policy is making us lose it. There's that point. And then there's the national security point for free societies versus closed societies. China, with their EC&Y and their surveillance money, against the free world. And we, the free world, and yes, we're the world's reserve currency, have a duty and obligation to our shared principles to protect this. And so those issues are not even in the conversation politically right now, because you just have simple populist politics in an election year, because it's easy, because there's just not enough understanding of this issue. You get past that simple politics and look at the realities of our fiscal and economic situation, our international challenges between free people and unfree people and tyranny, and the issue wins the day. The principles win out, and what leads us is not our politicians right now, particularly our people running for president. What leads us is our technology companies, our technologists who are telling us, oh, you can have your cake and eat it too. We can future-proof freedom and privacy and future-proof the dollar to guarantee that the architecture is such that we want it to always preserve our values. Oh, and by the way, get the benefits of all of this technology and what it does with our money and be a free society. So it's our technologists and our technology companies right now that are going to have to take the lead. They're going to have to tell the story. They will have friends in Congress helping them tell that story while we educate the public so that the populace don't have an uneducated public to sell their wares to.
With all due respect to the politicians, with utmost respect and deepest respect.
Yes, thank you.
It's hard to criticize if you're not going to participate, and I say that broadly. To see what other jurisdictions are doing, and then to point it out, and yet not participate. I think that is really the biggest concern amongst those who hold certain values, which is if everyone is participating right now, why handcuff the public sector? The private sector that is trying very hard to innovate, which is clearly what we're seeing on the political front from different agencies, which also is a reflection of some of the frustration across the board.
Yeah, if I can just add to what Paul said, I think in the last 20 years there's a great case study of free societies versus closed societies investing in emerging markets. I was telling earlier, I have two friends who work for IFC and the World Bank, and they have been losing on the investments because, again, free societies with all the politics have been taking too long, where other countries are coming and just giving the money with no conditions. And I think that when it's going to come to digital money as an infrastructure, you're going to see the same pattern of certain countries coming and saying, here's your payment infrastructure, it comes with no terms and conditions, and guess what, you could do whatever you want in terms of surveillance. And I think that there's the responsibility of free societies to first of all, at least try to do the best you can to prevent that from happening. And I think that there's just this false dichotomy that is happening right now with cheap politics, that technology is the problem. At the end of the day, today in the US, if politicians were to do something that just will never happen, but will change the Bank Secrecy Act to report on every financial transaction that is above a penny, you have achieved surveillance without, implementing one line of code. So there's always an ability to surveil your citizens if that's what you want to do. And I think what ended up happening is people blame the technology rather than just saying you actually just need to have the right policy in place. If anything, you should actually be much more engaged in the conversation and make sure that your policy and your laws are continuing to protect citizens, because in the absence of that, in the vacuum of that, you're actually going to see people innovate outside of your control and are going to do things that are actually contrary to what we are trying to achieve as a free society. So I think what we're trying to do as the private sector is again, continuing to educate, because I do think that there is a lot of powers behind the scenes that don't necessarily want to see CBDC succeed for many reasons. And I do actually have quite a lot of sympathy to regulators and politicians, because if you just think about the amount of technology moves at an exponential rate, right? The headcount of regulators and politicians definitely does not grow at an exponential rate. And when you start hearing homomorphic encryption, multi-party computation, zero-knowledge proofs, blockchain, crypto, this coin, this coin, this coin, this coin, we have this model, it's really hard to keep track, right? So I do think that for us as an industry, the private sector, we also need to get aligned and come together to stop the confusion. Because at the end of the day, I do think that the confusion is really what gives its hand to cheap politics, because there is no clear message that is being sent, whether it's to DC and I would say also other jurisdictions.
So then what is a common international message? What do you think that should be?
A common international.
Yeah, if there is a message that we need to send, we collectively, as administrators, public sector leaders, private sector leaders, that reflect the best of this idea of the technology? What is that common message?
I will just start from, at least from the technology side of thing. And this is what I said when we were giving testimony in DC. The technology can implement whatever policy politicians want to enshrine in this technology and the like. So at least I do think that as the tech industry, we just need to be very clear. You can achieve privacy. You can prevent the issuer of money from seeing every small transaction that happens. On the other hand, you could also have no privacy. At the end of the day, it's a configuration. I think that the tech sector, whether it's stable coin issuers or vendors like digital assets and some of our peers, I think the message from the tech industry should be whatever is the policy that policymakers want to enshrine in the payment rails is possible. I think that that's extremely important because I do actually see that message being confused. Stable coins is where you have privacy, CBDC, you want to have privacy. Both running on the same technology, sending clear, like the opposite message. To me, again, that doesn't make sense. So I do think that at least from the tech side, it's extremely important that we send a really unified message. Technology is a tool that can implement whatever policy that you want.
Yeah, I think the answer to your question is, and I'll speak more bluntly, like, because I don't care. I'm a recovering politician.
You're a recovering politician.
You know, China is going to go export tyranny in a box. They're going to go to every authoritarian and say, we've got your smart city solution, we've got your surveillance system, we've got tyranny in a box, here's your money, we'll give you a kit, you can keep your people under, you're just going to be a subsidiary of us, but here you go. That's going to happen. That is happening. And they're going to do it by hook and crook and by inducement and other incentives and disincentives. So we, not just America, we, the free world, owes it to ourselves and owes it to the world to bring an alternative. An alternative where we have standards that we all develop, curate, and agree upon so that we can have a plethora of competitive products that are out there. The Brits, the Swiss, the whoever's can put competitive products out there so that the free world can enjoy its freedom and stand up and show an alternative to the temptation that some countries are going to have to sign up for the tyranny in a box. So that's this kind of the way I see it. And I know we're all frustrated that here, I mean, I'm a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, so I'm frustrated with Gary Gensler and the way that those guys act as well. But I think to try and be charitable to this administration, I think the political appointees and the career people in these agencies don't want to pop their head above the radar right now in this political moment for fear of getting killed and not having the space and time to work on these ideas. So I think, you know, I think stablecoins is buying us time and space, but B, I think these regulators just want to lay low right now so they can go work on this. It's not that they're not thinking about it. They are thinking about it. They're just not going to go out there and promote what they're doing because they know the demagoguery is going to get them and it's going to hurt them in advancing their mission. That's what I think they are doing right now.
I think the calming message that you're asking for is that, you know, be present at the global stage. I think one of the problems we're facing here is that, very simplistic now, I apologize in advance, but in this part of the world, market managed or market run solution seems to be the sort of the dominant model. In Asia, it's more of the other end of the spectrum, and Europe is sort of in between. But Europe is trying to, at least trying to sort of regulate crypto, regulate AI, sort of put up the boundaries, and it's actually prepared to lose a bit of the innovation spirit and the competitiveness as a result. And we will never be able to sort of have a joint opinion across the globe. So we need to at least agree on the sort of the least common denominators. I agree with those who says that it's going to be a world with both crypto and stable coins and CBDCs. But I also think that we need to really be respectful that different countries will make different choices. What we need to agree on is the cross-border rails, the global rails. And when I despair over these things, I usually think about two things: US history and airline traffic. And let me elaborate a little bit on that. US history, look at life from the bright side. You quarrel like crazy over should you have a central bank at all, and you try to manage without one for a very long time until you sort of caved in and say, all right, fair enough, the rest of the world is probably right, we need one. And it got sort of structured in the end. And the airline, why do I point that out? Well, they managed to move things cross-border, right? We fly over many borders when we move around on airlines. So if we can't move ourselves around, we should probably be able to agree on at least common denominators so we can move our money around. And then we can argue like crazy over the Chinese model versus the US model. But finding these least common denominators, I think that's going to calm our way. And then we're not going to get everything right at first. So it's going to be mistakes, and the Americans, you are going to jump up and down and say, oh, this is not market friendly enough, and yeah, it's not innovative enough. But at least we're getting somewhere, and I think that's the right sort of spirit.
It's about participation and showing up, Andres, right?
Yes, and I was just going to say, we keep mentioning CBDCs and stablecoins. Can we please make it a triad and add commercial bank money just as automatically as we pair CBDC and stablecoins? There's no reason not to leverage whatever advantages these technologies can bring for where the real, with apologies to everyone else, but where the real action is today. Now, having said that, I think it's incredibly appropriate that the Atlantic Council should be co-hosting this event, because I think one thing that became clear through the sessions all day today in this conversation is that having gone through a series of phases of fetishizing the technology, then the asset, we're now landing on some of the fundamental geopolitical questions that are the real drivers behind this.
Yes.
We haven't mentioned once a consumer need here, a pressing need for retail CBDC. We haven't mentioned once whether cross-border wholesale payments can be fixed first through updates of laws and regulations, because the technology is not necessarily at fault. What we're talking about is really geopolitics and the shape of the world of the future.
The geopolitics question arises because of the lack of action that we've seen over the past decade. And when the private sector sees a problem and evolves a solution, are they playing a role that governments should? And you're shaking your head no.
I'm shaking my head because I think this debate is the continuation of geopolitics by other means, primarily.
Or we're just in the part of history where a lot of breakthroughs are happening at the same time. It was the same thing in the 19th century. We had several sort of general purpose technologies. The private sector runs ahead, exploring it, get a lot of things right, a couple of things wrong, and then sort of things start to sort itself out, not by nature, but because there's an interaction between law, policy making, supervision, and the private sector. So we may just be in a very stressful time at the moment. But I think it takes a bit of ambition here. I think it takes a bit of political risk-taking. It's going to take a bit of exactly showing up, not criticizing the G20 for everything they do. Actually, that's the best forum we have for this kind of collaborations. Be there and get down to business.
As a young journalist, I was taught to follow the money. As a much more experienced one, I recognize it's not necessarily about the money per se. It's about the structure of money, how money flows between countries. To your point, there is a very clear geopolitical aspect to all of this. So when we talk about the future and we talk about all of these central banks that are investigating, exploring, and experimenting in policy rails, be it stablecoins or their own CBDCs, and either policing domestic sectors, creating international rails. As we explore all of these themes, what is the world that we're going to graduate to? I mean, this is really what all of you are participating in right now. What is the world that my 6-year-old is going to graduate into, that we're all going to inherit as a result of these conversations? What is that?
Ask the technologist.
I mean, listen, I think that, and this maybe goes to some of the remarks that were done earlier. I think that we need to think about it from a retail side and then kind of the backbone. I think that when it comes to retail, we talk a lot about privacy. I personally think that when you think about Gmail, Venmo, all of these products, retail doesn't really care about privacy. It kind of is a cool topic to debate, but really we give our privacy very quickly to big tech that provides us really good user experience. And really the direction where the world is going is that everything is digital.
I think the world is waking up to that lack of care.
But his point makes our point, which is if tyrants get out there with this first and put people up onto these things, then freedom is set back in the 21st century. So we have an obligation to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I guess my point is what retail cares about is convenience, right? At the end of the day, I do think, and maybe I say it too easily that we don't care about privacy. It's more about the level of importance. I think that retail makes, choices for the most part when it comes to convenience. And that's why it's so important that the backbone is actually able to facilitate the privacy that I do think is actually very important. I think that when you go to the average, Joe or Joan in the street, and you're going to ask them about how privacy gets enforced, yeah, they're going to say that privacy is important, but do they actually understand? No. And that's why I think that it's extremely important that from a policy perspective, we're seeing this now with AI, we're seeing it with payment, we're seeing it with so many other technologies. I think that as the world is becoming more and more digital, it is becoming more and more easy to exploit, privacy and do a lot of things that in an analog world would be, much harder. And that's why I do think that it is extremely important that the backbone, which is more the wholesale side, is able to cater for these privacy requirements and scalability requirements. That's why we at Digital Asset are much more focused on the backbone pipes, meaning the wholesale, bank to bank, bank to exchanges. That's where I think is going to, you're going to see most of the innovation with this technology.
What does the future look like?
I never won a political fight by playing defense, ever. You play offense, and that means you go seize the moral high ground, and you lean into these issues by saying we can actually enhance freedom, we can enhance privacy, we can improve these values with the proper design of this technology, and advance these things we care about, banking the unbanked throughout the world who have no services, who have terrible currencies. You can actually win the argument by taking the force of the arguments against the technology and harnessing it to advancing this argument properly designed. So I think, look, I'll quote a Brit, democracy is the worst possible form of government except for all the other forms of government. It's sloppy, it's messy, but we deliver. And the reason it delivers so well is because it has a free society with private property rights that produces the kind of innovation that gives us these ideas and these technologies. And using it by infusing these values that we in free society have together, I think we'll win the day. And we will win the argument. But it will be sloppy, it will be frustrating, and it will be a little late, but I still think we get there.
Does America still have a role to play on the international stage?
Absolutely. I agree with all the things you said about decision making being sloppy and messy and delayed. But that's life, But it's much better than the alternatives. Rather a late decision than a quick decision that turns out to be horrible. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you are needed out there, and what I'm saying now is saying as a representative from coming from a very small country. You have to be very careful to choose what friends you're playing with on the world stage. But at the same time, you try to be independent. And I think what would be very powerful for the US, and I have to be careful what I say now, is to make the offer around how to help countries being independent in the way they pursue their happiness and progress. Because that's one of the beautiful things this country's model has actually achieved over history. The transparency, choice, the sort of reasonable balance between the public and the private, the rule making, and definitely there, because if you're not there, there'll be a void, and there is never such thing as a void on the global stage.
And when we think about, even from the institutional finance side with Citi as an American, obvious bank, but really with international influence, even your withdrawal from some countries cause geopolitical concerns as well. And so what is the role that you view technology playing internally, but also externally?
Yeah, I think one area that maybe doesn't get enough attention is the likely exponential growth in complexity. If we think the rails on which money moves today globally are complex, when you introduce some form of tokenization, you're not just going to set aside all the complexity we have today, you're just going to overlay it with another layer, which is going to create innumerable points where interoperability is going to be required. There was a lot of talk this afternoon about interoperability between differently engineered and designed CBDC setups, potentially, and questions as to what the shape of that interoperability could take. And that's great, but I think we heard nothing about interoperability between this new layer and the existing layers, which are not going to go away. So unless you want to end up having to create huge financial market infrastructures that mediate those connections all over the world and among themselves, which would just cube the complexity, that's a good incentive. And from the perspective of a company that is present in 160 jurisdictions around the world and moves a lot of money around every day, that is not an appetizing picture of additional complexity.
Well, I mean, it's like a microcosm of what we're talking about. You're taking your principles as an American firm, but when you are in a separate jurisdiction, there is no synapse back to the parent. These are very exclusive rails sometimes in countries and jurisdictions because the rails are very specific.
So you need to play locally, but always under a set of values which are immutable globally, and where those values are not compatible with the reality on the ground, we will withdraw, as we did in Russia.
It's a great metaphor. I'd like to open it up to the audience. We have a few minutes left as you digest a lot of these themes and ideas. Would love to open it up to the audience. There will be someone with a microphone in her hand. If you could state your name, your agency or organization, and then state your question. Thank you so much.
Great. I direct this to Paul, though others can pipe in. What do you think the chances are of getting a stablecoin legislation passed in Congress over the next, you pick the number of years, and it being bipartisan supported?
So if you give me a plural number, I'll say very, very high. This year, I mean, one of my closest friends is Patrick McHenry, who was my chief deputy whip when I was speaker. He's got his bill out of committee. He's actually mapping floor time in February, March. So he's got a plan to get his bill off the floor. Think he's got the votes. He's one of the best vote counters we have. And so, you know, the Senate, I can't speak to how well they're going along, but I think you have a very reasonable chance the House will pass it this session. In end of Q1, maybe beginning of Q2. So that's always a good sign for getting the law. There's a chance the Senate can move it. If not, they'll get it done next session. So I give you a 1 to 3 year, I give you a 1 to 3 years, definitely within 3 years. Within 1 year is possible, definitely within 3 years.
Do you think the House version would be supported bipartisan?
It does have bipartisan support. The House version does have bipartisan support. Yeah, so they've got the votes for it, I think.
Over here.
I have a question on the emphasis that has been given to privacy. I come from a family of girls, so one day my nephew called me and he says, "Oh, Auntie, I'm going to be a best man. Can you buy me a suit?" And I went into a men's shop and I bought a suit. 10 minutes later, I got a call from the credit card saying, "Oh, we think your card has been stolen. It has been used in a men's suit, in the men's shop." I didn't even realize that I never buy things from men's shops. Now, at the same time, we have social media. People post everything about themselves, where they have gone. So the question that I have is, this concern about privacy and the CBDC, are we not exaggerating it? People are free to put their, privacy, the most private things, where they went, where they danced, on social media. And every day, every end of the year, we get a statement from Visa and MasterCard that said you spent so much on food, on clothes, on, If the government wanted it, they could just ask MasterCard to provide that. So why are we, emphasizing?
If MasterCard abuses your privacy, you can fire them. You can go to Visa, or you can fire them and go to American Express. The government's a monopoly. So you can't fire your government. So the reason for the higher concern about retail CBDC from government is government can coerce you. Government can do things to you that a credit card company cannot, and you have no redress. That's why the elevated concern for giving this kind of power, not to Visa, MasterCard, but to government.
Yeah, but I do think that it is important, because a lot of times people talk about all of our constitutional rights. And maybe the counterpoint to that is, from the private sector, you are not entitled
That's right.
to those constitutional rights.
That's kind of lost in the argument, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying, people worry about Big Brother in government than Big Brother, Mark Zuckerberg. You know what I mean? They're just people worry about Mark Zuckerberg, but I'm just saying it's a bigger concern when it gets to the level of your government. That's my point.
At the end of the day, privacy is a commodity that has been taken away from us, from social media to now potentially technology with money, et cetera, et cetera. But blockchain and this technology also can be a level playing field
Absolutely.
back for the individual, so that when we own our own information, we can then choose whether or not to commoditize or not. That would be our choice as individuals. Of course, as countries around the world, Cecilia, as you very eloquently described, this is a communal and global effort of which you're all participating. And I want to thank our panelists this evening for their very candid and honest remarks, and for that, so very grateful to all of you. Thank you so much.